President Cyril Ramaphosa has reiterated the Government of National Unity's commitment to economic growth and improving South Africa's ports, rail and roads, saying it will spend 940 billion on infrastructure over the next 3 years. This in a decisive step toward economic growth. According to enterprise asset management specialist Pragma, the success of this investment hinges on effective maintenance and asset management areas where South Africa already has proven solutions. Pragma Chief Revenue Officer Bani Kgosana joins us now with a greater perspective. Thank you so much for your time, Bani. Now, from the plans that President Cyril Ramaphosa has tabled, is the government going far enough in addressing the infrastructure needs that we do need to lift economic growth substantially?
Yeah, I think it's if we took our GDP growth, which is, I think if we're lucky, will be 1%. I think that alone tells us that not enough is being done. But I think that it's making the radar of certainly the state of the nation and the discussions that you'll hear on platforms such as yours. It clearly shows you that it's an area of high concern, and it needs to be a priority for government and all institutions in South Africa if we have any hope of moving from a middle-income country into the high-growth country that we wish to be.
Well, I mean, there's investment, but today we are particularly talking about asset management. So the investment can be made, but what does the ideal model of asset management need to look like to ensure that we capitalize on all these opportunities that infrastructure investment actually presents?
Zinati, I think maybe if we took half a step back, and I often use this to remind myself of the importance of asset management, is that if you think about government's fundamental role, government's fundamental role is to be an asset manager.
Okay.
It provides fixed assets to the public so that those with innovative ideas, those with business ideas use those assets, whether those be road, whether they be rail, whether they be electricity. So I often like to say to my team that government is an asset manager, and that is their core function. And it's from there then we then start saying, how important is it that our key asset manager maintains those assets? Because assets are only useful to the extent that they remain reliable.
Yes.
And available, and then we can then use them. So it's vital that we support both as the public, who are the ultimate users of those assets, as well as government, make it front and center as their priority to look after those assets and make sure that they are maintained. So maintenance is not a by the way thing. It's core to any development aspirations that we have as a country, isn't it?
So government needs to be the asset manager here, is the key asset manager, but does it need help? We often have calls for different projects for collaboration. What should an ideal model of collaboration look like here with the different stakeholders?
Now, I'm glad you asked that question, because it's actually just as recently as an hour ago that I was pleased to see an article around some of the legislative changes that are happening both at National Treasury and in terms of municipalities, where certain regulations, they spoke of a Regulation 16 of National Treasury, and at the municipal level, Regulation 309, both of which relate to making it easier for public-private partnerships to be established, reducing the thresholds for which public-private partnerships can be entered into. They were further talking about certain national government departments which are now going to be able to have permanent teams whose job it is going to be to identify public projects and programs where the public and the private entities that have interest in that space can work together. So to me, that's really exciting. Talking about the ideal partnerships, it's exactly those. Public-private partnerships in their different variations. There are those where the private partner can build and operate similar to Gautrain, and others will build, operate, and then transfer. There are many models, all of which speak to expertise in the private sector as well as in government. And we must acknowledge that there is expertise in the public sector. I think the perception that there isn't expertise in the public sector is wrong. Take a trip down to ESCOM and meet their fantastic engineers, and you will see that there's a lot of expertise. It's the combined expertise of the public sector and the private sector that is the ideal model to answer your question.
Well, I do understand that Pragma has always been, has also been a key partner in a number of these projects, this infrastructure space in a number of countries. Just talk to me about the learnings then that you've had that we can implement and should implement in South Africa. Really the do's and don'ts.
Is that if I were to take from my experience, so for instance, there's a team, Pragma, fortunately, born and developed in South Africa, and it has then extended like a number of South African companies into different countries. One of the countries into which the founder of this organization extended to was the Netherlands. And in that space, Pragma consultants, many of them from the Netherlands, but otherwise also a combination of South African and Netherlands experts, provide a number of services. Some of them are advisory services. You'll be amazed how important it is to provide advice on how best to do things, what is best practice. In those spaces, as you might know, the Netherlands, one of their biggest issues relates to water management. So they have water boards similar to Rand Water, Umgeni Water, and others. And they simply advise them on the best way of maintaining their water infrastructure. So that is around knowledge.
Yes.
So people and knowledge. Then you can have technological advice. And living in the digital age, there are platforms, whether they be cloud-based or on-premise platforms, digital platforms where a lot of the data that is generated by the machines and the equipment can find a home. And in that home, that data can be analyzed so that there is feedback, so that data-driven decisions, which is a popular term that's used, can then be made by those water boards. We've extended some of those, that knowledge into, there's a hospital, Ngosi Albert Luthuli Hospital, where through a public-private partnerships, one of our partners works on providing the facilities management offerings into that hospital. So the examples are there, and all of them talk about planning what it is that you are going to be looking after, having a digital home for those equipments, knowing what cycles that equipment needs to be looked after, according to the regulations that the manufacturers provide to you, and making sure you stick to those. Those are the ABCs of maintenance, to be honest. Very similar to looking after your body. Follow habits, good habits of eating, good habits of exercise, and you will maintain your body in good condition.
Just lastly, as we wrap up the conversation, of course, you do have this investment coming online, and also the collaborations that I'm sure are underway there, interactions as we join everybody together to make this happen. But at the same time, I'm wondering if we are meeting all of those opportunities with the sufficient skills capacity.
Skills capacity is a big issue, and again, we at Pragma, that's the reason why we have an entire division dedicated towards training, and this training is specifically around maintenance management. So everything from public courses that give you general understanding of maintenance, through to full-on year-long courses that are NQF level 5 in one instance, which are basically a university level grade training. So we have a very strong emphasis around training. But when you talk about investment, you then also need to be saying there are well-developed ways in which we say, if we have limited funds, how do we then look at the whole backlog of projects that we need to run in order to either maintain our infrastructure or improve it, and then really identify where we will get the greatest bang for our buck. That's the expression. So those are well-developed models where we know that we can't spend all the many billions that people say we need to fix our infrastructure. So let's identify the critical infrastructure, the projects that if put in place and executed properly, will then create the space for the other projects to then be implemented. So it's a systematic process. Once again, to personalize it, I have a fixed salary, I go home, we plan what we're going to do with that money, knowing that it is limited, but used properly, it then enables us to sustain ourselves as a family. It's the same thing with a country and a government.
Indeed. And of course, we will also get more details on how everything is going to work, particularly on the finance side on Wednesday when the finance minister tables that budget, of course, with the infrastructure plans also. Thank you so much for your time, Bani. That was Bani Kgosana, Chief Revenue Officer at Pragma.